go too far. And I want folks to understand these are not trained martial artists.
Right.
These are not people who be trained in hand-to-hand combat. Their training is very minimal. And I feel that that's one of the things where we failed in our leadership of our police forces by not having them trained properly. They have a gun on their hip. They need proper training, psychological access for being able to discuss their problems and their issues without fear of retaliation from their bosses. They also need to be worked less. These guys are on crazy shifts, like crazy hour-long shifts. So by the time you're dealing with this officer, you're dealing with a very tired person who's been stressed all day. Now, what other pain compliance things can they do?
Well, I've seen all kinds of things. Technically, pepper spray, and LRAD, the long-range acoustic device you'll see mounted on top of the armored vehicles that generates a pulse of sound so loud that it literally vibrates the bones inside your head.
Do we even know how many hours of training they get on an LRAD machine? Because it's very easy. My understanding of the LRAD, the sonic weapon, is that it's very easy to turn it up too high.
Sure.
And fuck people up.
Sure. No, there's not a lot of government statistics that are easily accessible on the use of any of this stuff. Technically, a taser is a pain compliance weapon. Let me go through tasers a little bit, okay? What now?
Tasers were originally developed in the 70s as a weapon that they needed something to deal with PCP users and other hard drug users that didn't respond to a beanbag round or could handle 5 or 6 cops because they're around a horse tranquilizer. So they developed the taser to deal with a rampaging, violent person so you wouldn't have to kill them. And now they sold that to the public with that purpose in mind. Now they're using them as instruments of torture. I don't know legally how they get off on using a taser as a, quote, pain compliance device. Me as a citizen, I never voted on a law that allows a police officer to inflict pain on me to get me to do their orders.
Right.
They're just human beings. They weren't elected to office. They were hired by people, and their job was to enforce the law. Their job isn't to torture me. Their job isn't to terrorize me.
Well, here's something about tasers that a lot of people don't understand as well. This is the rationale that they used to justify mass implementation of tasers. Yes, originally they were developed and designed to give law enforcement an option against somebody who is fucked up on so many drugs that the officer can't stop them. That is true. But state by state, in order to lobby and legislate to get these things used by individual state law enforcement agencies, okay, they had to say in the legal documents, in the language, okay, that a taser would be used as a reasonable as an alternative to using lethal force kind of thing, right? Meaning that God, I just lost my train of thought. Never mind.
I'm going to keep referring back to working security. You know, we weren't armed with tasers as a security. When I worked security, the only thing I had working for me as a security person in a club was my training. The only thing I had was my superior physical ability to handle myself. That's what I had. When I would grab an unruly person, I didn't have 15 guys. I didn't have a badge. I only had myself and maybe a couple security guys to help me. Because, you know, you grab a guy in the mosh pit, you're throwing him out. You're dealing with a drunk. You're dealing with a guy hitting on something. You're dealing with a guy who is out of his head on something that you don't even know what it is. And the only tool I had was my mind and my ability, so my training was a lot different. And there was no tasers, and we don't see security officers in clubs with tasers tasing people all over the place because you'd have lawsuits out the window. And
right,
I
of course.
In this country, we have to re-examine the policy of taser use. We really have to put into law that no, you can't shock a college kid because he said something you don't like at the microphone at the gathering. You don't get to shock somebody because they didn't get on the floor fast enough. The taser is for a violent situation with
Right.
an overwhelming force that you don't want to kill. It's not about
Sure.
grandmas and old guys with
Yeah,
a big
you just
mouth.
connected the wires in my little rat brain. What I wanted to say earlier was that the taser was originally justified in the language of the laws, state by state, for use in various law enforcement agencies as an alternative to lethal force. It was a intermediary stage between, you know, uh, having to handle it with your hands. Uh, it might I might need to use lethal force. In that middle stage, you can use a taser to subdue the person, and then I'm gonna have to shoot them. Okay, I've done security work too for a number of years, and there's ways you can subdue somebody and not have to use a less lethal weapon on them. Like if there's two guys say fighting in a club, because when I used to work at the I would do this. The guy that looks like he's the most aggressive, the one that you think's going to actually win the fight, and you got to assess this really quickly. You run behind him and you grab him in an arm triangle, from behind. So your left arm is around one side of his neck, and your right arm is underneath his armpit and around his neck, and you just lean backwards. What you're doing is you're cutting off the air supply to both the carotid, external, and internal jugular veins on both sides, and you just walk backwards.
A lot of people using those techniques too, Mike. They've had a lot of problems with baton chokes, and I think it comes back to improper training. These guys should be in a dojo.
Right.
I really believe our police officers need to be in a dojo, and they need to learn jujitsu. They need to learn some techniques.
Sure, but not lethal techniques. I mean.